Well, Trevor, it's so great to have you joining us for our 2025 Lent series, looking at how God's love changes the way that we go about seeking to bring change to our world where it's needed. And really thankful to have you on board to talk about how God's love changes how we are generous. And before we jump in, it'd be great to hear a little bit about you. You've got a long history with Tearfund, but yeah, love to hear a little bit about you, what you spend your time doing and your connection to Tearfund.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be part of it. I got involved with Tearfund after I left university. I studied economics at university and my eyes were opened to the issues of global poverty, and I was a Christian who was really interested in the global church and mission, and I thought that ministry in the context of poverty was something that was really on my heart, and Tearfund was able to speak into those questions that I had so profoundly. I went to a session that C.B. Samuel ran at Asheville Presbyterian my first year out of uni, and that really changed the course of my life. We worked in South America for 7 years with the Anglican Church of Paraguay in a project that was funded by Tearfund UK, and I was on Tearfund staff for a while, served on the board for a few years as well. So Tearfund has been an integral part of my Christian journey.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, really rich, lots of different touch points there. But it's interesting, I think, for lots of people who are in that kind of study season of life and that kind of, the busting open of the worldview, and as people of faith kind of going, how does this line up with that, and wondering what God has to say about it all. It's awesome to hear how God's kind of steered your path and sparked your interests along the way.
Yeah. And look, the input of Tear overseas partners, when people have come to speak in Australia, has been, for both Jed and I, my wife, we treasure those times still many, many years after they happened. So it's been, as I say, really integral to our journey.
Beautiful. That's great. Yeah. Well, we are, many people will be engaging with this series during the season of Lent, which is the 40 days leading up to Easter, kind of a throwback to Jesus's time in the wilderness before he started his ministry. What does Lent mean to you? Is it something that you practice in your own faith journey throughout the years?
Sporadically at best, I'd say. So, yes, there have been times when I've done technology fasts or alcohol fasts or sugar fasts through Lent periods, and times when we've done Lenten Bible studies. It's been a tradition at our church to do Lenten Bible studies and to have a different season of things, or a different rhythm of things through the Lent season, to start with Maundy Wednesday and go through. It's been reflecting on life and lifestyle has been part of Lent for me for a long time, and I've done different things to mark the season.
Yeah. I think I'm pretty similar. There's been that 1 year that I gave up coffee. That was, I don't want to repeat that one, but maybe that was, God had his hand on that for a reason. But yeah, I mean, giving things up or fasting is a big part of that Lenten practice for a lot of people. And it's, interesting to think about that in terms of this conversation around generosity, which, kind of by definition, it's giving up, it's sharing. So it's a great kind of thing to keep in mind as we head into this season and talk about these ideas. What are some of the things that come up for you as you think about giving up our treasures and what's near and dear to us, and particularly as it relates to the assets, the possessions, or the money that we have?
I mean, as you're asking the question, Jim Elliot's words came to mind that, he is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to take hold of what he cannot lose, using language, of course, from the 1950s that was highly gendered. But the point being that generosity helps us get in touch with a generous God and to connect with the most important things in life. The messages we get through the media, the culture in which we exist is highly materialistic and highly acquisitive and designed to make us feel that our desires are always unquenched, and there's always more that we could have, and that the next thing will make us happier. And we need to push back against that. And the main offensive weapon that we have to defend ourselves against the demon of greed is generosity. It's breaking that. It's acting decisively against those temptations to put ourselves in a situation where we're jumping off that treadmill and saying, no, we really believe that the secret of life is, the joy of life is in the giving, not in the getting. And that we are part of a community where there's the opportunity to express generosity within the community, and then for our community to make known the love of Jesus by the way that we are generous to others.
Yes, so there's a real resistance in generosity against the cultural kind of norm.
Yeah, I really see it that way. It's an important part. It's one of the fruits of the Spirit. It is part of a mature Christian life to be generous. But I actually think when we live in, Jesus spoke about the dangers of wealth in a poor agrarian society 2,000 years ago. How much more are we subject to marketing campaigns from highly sophisticated companies who understand the way that we respond and have designed programs specifically to try and get us to keep acquiring things, to keep experiences, life, things. We are constantly bombarded by messages that we need to push back against, and I think that we need to push back with generosity. Yeah. And I think there are two elements to that. One is we need to be able to. I think that people should be able to see in our lifestyles a testimony. So I think that our generosity should be systematic and put us in a position where the person sitting in the next cubicle at work or the person living next door has a higher standard of living than we do because we're giving away more. So there's a notable impact on us, and that regular, consistent, disciplined giving can be a really important part of discipleship and disciplining ourselves not to always want more, but to live with a different set of values. But beyond that, I think it's possible for people to get sort of locked into that generous mindset and do the right thing, but potentially lose the spirit of it. So I think we need spontaneous acts of irrational generosity thrown in there too, just to kind of remind ourselves who we are and to celebrate and to be a little bit go well beyond just the planned and the programmed, to show that generosity is deeply rooted within us and that we can laugh at the devil.
Wow, I love that. So, okay, generosity, it all sounds really good, and there's a lot of good things to it, and it's clear from Scripture that we are called to be people of generosity, and we can assume that giving away our money and our possessions is a good thing to do. But 1 Corinthians 13 verse 3 specifically says, if I give all I possess to the poor, but do not have love, I gain nothing. So this is what I want to really dig into. What difference does love make to how we give? Or are there particular things that drive us to give without love?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you could envisage a situation where somebody was giving out of a sense of obligation or moral commitment and just thought it was the right thing to do. And became sort of legalistic about it. And I know that there are times in Christian history the church history where that's happened. But I think that a generous heart is looking to bless and to understand need. And that's always done in the context, usually done in the context of relationship and often in the context of community. And so rightly, they go hand in hand. It's unusual and unnatural that love and generosity wouldn't go together. I think Paul in Corinthians is talking about, is making hyperbolic statements to just show how amazing love is and how important and foundational love is. Our problem, frankly, isn't that we're giving away all our possessions, you and me, and people watching the video. Our problem is that perhaps we don't love enough. But I don't see those things in contradiction at all. I think that if you see somebody in need and your heart is moved, and you are moved to make some response. That's a loving response. And I think that the Christian community is a place where we should spur each other on to good deeds, as it says. We should needle each other and spark each other into acts of generosity by observing those around about us and talking about things that we can do together to show love in practical ways. And that nearly always involves generosity, whether it's time, whether it's finances, whether it's sharing other resources. Love is much more than a feeling. And when Paul's talking about that in 1 Corinthians 13, it's love in action, and that action will find expression in generous acts.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And by inherently, you can't be generous on your own. You need, you have to have someone to be generous towards. So it has to be done in that context of community and relationship. And so love needs to drive and flavour and colour those relationships, and generosity is just part of that, rhythm.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Yeah, I should just say though that it's interesting. Jesus said to the rich young man to sell all his possessions, give the money to the poor, and he doesn't, and he goes away sad. And the disciples are gobsmacked that Jesus lets him go. And they're gobsmacked because they associate his wealth with blessing, with God's blessing. And Jesus sees it as a problem. And we in the rich West contextualise that to say that his attitudes were wrong. And so we're able to read that story and come away thinking that we've got to have the right attitude to wealth. And we can use that right attitude to sidestep ever selling one possession and giving money to the poor, let alone all of them. I think there's probably room for us to contemplate a little bit more the sort of sacrificial generosity that Jesus is talking about as normative for his followers. And when he says to the rich young man, sell all your possessions, give to the poor, he also says, come and follow me. So he doesn't say live a penniless life on the streets. He says, come and join my community, where we know they shared a common purse. They were the beneficiaries of generosity of wealthy women. They were part of a community that lived differently, where it wasn't all about building bigger barns and acquiring more possessions. And so I think the temptation for us in the rich West is to spiritualise those difficult passages about selling all your possessions. And I think we should sit heavily. What have I ever sold? What was the last thing I sold and gave the money to the poor? Usually I sell things if I want to upgrade. I put them on Facebook Marketplace to something better. I don't put it on Facebook Marketplace and give specifically to give the money to the poor.
Yeah. There's some real challenge there. And there are, alongside that story, that interaction, there's these other interactions that are coming to mind. I noted about Jesus and Zacchaeus is one. There's the Pharisees, but there's also Jesus pointing out the widow who came to the temple with very, very little that she could give. It's not just all of the doom and gloom stories. There's also this drawing out of other ways. There's so many different responses.
Although if you think about it, she's giving everything she has as well.
Yeah.
I take your point. It's not about the quantum. But it is about. It's not about the quantum in terms of how much money that you give, but it is about the quantum of of what it costs you. It's about the quantum of the cost, even though it's not about the quantum of the money.
Yes, and it's not. And like you're saying, it's not just the spirit of it. It's actually the attitude of your heart and what that means. In the dollars at the end of the day.
That's right. And John says that in his epistles too, about not loving in thought and word, but in action, in who sees their brother or sister and in need and doesn't reach out. So absolutely, generosity is the expression of love. It's love in action.
Yeah. And the way that God's love transforms us and transforms our giving will look different from one person to the next based on how material we might be, our situation, our stage of life, that kind of thing, our the opportunities that we have. Do you have a personal example of how a greater experience or understanding of God's love changed the way you've sought to be generous?
Well, I often say I work as a financial advisor, and I often work with Christian people at very different stages of life. And I've been through just about all of those myself, from putting ourselves through Eastern College in Philadelphia, Tony Campolo and Ron Sider, where we lived on our savings and had no income for 2 years, through to working in Paraguay for 7 years on a low stipend, through working in the charitable sector and more recently in the commercial sector. There are lots of different stages of my life, and I see that in my clients and people I talk to about money. And I say that there are times in your life where you cannot afford to give a cent away. Every cent is spent before it comes into your bank account. You are living really, and in this day and age, there are lots of people who are really strapped, and I don't want them to hear this and feel somehow condemned and judged. I think we have to find ways to be generous, whatever our circumstances. And if we don't have money at the moment, what is it that we can do? How can we express generosity and love with what we have, the time that we have, the things that we can share, the ways that we can be generous into people's lives by making a difference for them in ways that they need, that would cost us something, but I don't want people who are facing a cost of living crisis to feel like they have to hit a certain percentage of giving to meet God's approval. By the same token, people like me who've paid off their mortgage and whose children are living out of home, the newspapers say we don't have the same cost of living crisis unless we're living on, a settling income. And so many of us at my stage of life, working full time, no mortgage, kids off our hands, we shouldn't be stopping at a certain number or a certain percentage. We should be pushing more deeply into generosity and looking at ways in which we can do things that are far beyond the 10% that people might have had in their mind as a giving goal. So there'll be times and seasons, and love demands that we ask ourselves seriously where we are in the season and how we respond. And the big secret, I would say, in my life is something that comes from Jesus, talking about money very publicly all the time. He made money something that he talked about with his circle of disciples. And Jude and I have found great freedom over the years in sitting down with people who love us, who share our values, and asking them for their wisdom as we've faced big financial decisions. And we've found that incredibly liberating, because the temptation for us is to be too easy on ourselves or too hard on ourselves. And to have perspective has been really helpful. And before we went to South America, we were leaving Australia, and we had all of our superannuation paid out because it was before 1993. And so that was a lot of money. I think it was $27,000. And we went away with some friends for a week, and we said, this is our situation. We laid everything out before them, and we asked for their wisdom. And they gave us really good insight, and we gave some of that away, and we invested some of that money ethically. When we came back from South America, it was that money that we'd invested that actually became our contribution to the deposit that we were able to use for a co-living place that got us into a Christian community household that we've been in for the last 27 years. So we felt that by sharing that decision, we were greatly blessed, and it gave people, and it's like holy ground. When people don't usually talk to each other about their finances. Yeah. It felt like a very privileged conversation to be in, where people would genuinely share what they thought.
Yeah. Oh, wow, that's really special. What about, because you talk in your reflection that you wrote for this series about this idea that secrecy guards sincerity. So on one hand, you've got, hey, let's talk about this more in the context of trusted faith community, seeking wisdom. But then also, this idea that don't let your, left hand know what your right hand is doing. My mind goes to those viral videos where someone springs $1,000 cash on an unsuspecting, person on the street and films it. And, oh, aren't I a great person or a great church because we just gave this homeless person $1,000. It's like celebrating that generosity, but then also feeling really awkward about that. What are your thoughts around this tension between this being a public thing and a shared thing and a community-owned thing versus the secrecy side of it? Help us understand that a little bit more.
Well, one of the most uncomfortable things I ever did when I was the chair of the Tier board was to receive a giant celebrity check from a real estate agent. So I think that sort of philanthropy is that backslapping, look at me sort of philanthropy is anathema to the Tearfund values. What had happened was a Tear supporter was selling a house, and they got the local real estate agents to commit to giving a percentage of their fee to charity, which was a lovely thing and a great thing to do. And they said it's just a straight up auction. The person who gives the most of their commission to charity gets the job. And so this real estate agent did that, and they gave half the money to their favourite charity and half the money to Tearfund, which was lovely. But I had to turn up as the chair and receive this big cheque. So that's not what I'm thinking about. So the socialising the decision, talking to people we loved about these things was very helpful. And it was a small circle. It was 9 people, and it was done in the context of relationship where we trusted those people, and we didn't think that was a decision that would trouble them. We thought that they were in a good position to help us make those decisions. I do think it's really important, though, that those people didn't tell us who to give to or where. They told us how much they thought we should give away, and then we went and did that. There's certainly the sort of giving that Jesus talks about, the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing when you're giving alms to the poor, as the verse says, has always informed the way that I've thought about this stuff, that you need to find quiet ways to do things. We go to Newtown Mission in Sydney, where a lot of our congregation lives on Centrelink benefits, and things come up from time to time where the community has a real need, and there are people in the congregation who want to respond generously, but the power dynamics of giving money within a congregation are dangerous. And we've all seen bad stories about how money can taint friendships and damage relationships and lead to mistrust. And where there's inequality, there's power inequality, and there's all sorts of risk. And so the way that we navigate that is to do things collectively and anonymously through the church. And so if somebody thinks that there's something that needs being done, it's there's a decision that passes through some discernment, and then there are a bunch of people who contribute, but it's all anonymous, and the assistance is given anonymously. And people, it's not a perfect system, but it's helped us deal with that in a way that reflects the fact that there is inequality and there's an opportunity for love, and there are people who have genuine needs and want to be helped. Other times, you can, those same people might take somebody out for a meal or buy something that they need and do something a little bit special. But where it's larger items, we've worked really hard to try and stop toxic charity where, it's kind of the power dynamics are just really obvious. So I think there's a place for community around challenging ourselves and being held accountable for the sorts of lifestyle decisions that we make, whether we're wealthy or less wealthy or not wealthy at all. Yeah. Because I think people who are going through a tough time will find that their Christian brothers and sisters are generous to them and will say, now is not the time in your life to be tithing. If you've got income, don't worry. You find ways to be generous with your time. But also where the transfer of assets happens, that we want that to happen in ways that really empowers the person who's receiving and giving, and doesn't sully those relationships or damage those relationships or leads to obligations or discomfort.
Yeah, that's great. What about
That's why Tearfund's so fantastic, right? I mean, the movement for churches to partner other churches overseas is fraught with danger and has led to all sorts of disasters for generations. And combining that through an agency that is doing the due diligence around the giving to make sure that it's really empowering the needy is far more sensible than churches trying to partner with other churches in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think there is so much that you can kind of see the beauty of being able to give in the context of partnership in that way, where communities who might be on the receiving end of people's generosity are actually the ones who are making decisions about how they want to overcome the challenges that are before them.
Absolutely.
And being really conscious of the power dynamics that are there. One of the things that I think pops up for me is people and this isn't just in the context of giving to charity, this is generosity across the board, is people being willing to be generous, but with with contingencies or a bit of agenda. I want to know the result of what I give to. I want to know how that person is going to use that thing that I've generously given to them. And I think that's one of the key ways that this love can come in, because we see Jesus on the cross pouring out this generous love to people who immediately throw it back in his face. And there's no sense of like conditional salvation there, is it? It's just love poured out, knowing that some people are going to say yes, and I will come and follow you, and some people are going to go away sad because they can't kind of meet that. But he does it regardless. And I think there's a real invitation and challenge in how we are generous ourselves to do that without strings attached.
Absolutely. We know also, though, that charity can be toxic when it is very much when people don't ask good questions, and money can be channeled to people who are supposed to share it and don't. And so it's an interesting point. I mean, the golden rule is the person with the gold makes the rules, and that's what we want to try and break down. And Jesus' generosity goes absolutely in the face of that, as you say, completely kenotic and self-giving. But I think when it comes to that sort of structured giving, where we're going to make a commitment to fund something long term, whether it's a local church or a Tearfund or whatever, I think we should be asking questions about: is this money really benefiting the people who are receiving it? What are we doing to make sure that we're not putting obligations on them? It's not our agenda driving their lives. I think they're very important questions to ask. But you can get stuck in that mindset where you sacrifice everything at the altar of efficiency and impact. And that's why you need those spontaneous bursts of irrational generosity, just to remind yourself that you're alive and that God is good, and that you don't have to measure the outcome of everything, and there will be blessing that comes from generosity, that you can just don't count the cost and don't try and enumerate the benefits.
Yeah, that's great. Well, to wrap up, if people are maybe wanting to focus on generosity through this season of Lent, do you have any practical ideas for how someone might go a little bit deeper with this, other than just give something away?
Yeah, well, I do think that it's probably worthwhile doing a little bit of an inventory of of how you're rich. Where does your wealth lie? Is it in time? Do you have time that you can give? Do you have a house full of stuff that you don't need, and you really can start to sell things and give money to the poor, and not just to declutter your house, but actually to make a little impact on your lifestyle, so that you're living within your means and your lifestyle is a testimony to your faith? And then how much money do you have to give? And are the things that you can do through this Lent season to create a bit more money? Can you forego some of your regular little pleasures to make a difference for other people? And as you do that, as in the spirit of Lent, then it turns that little bit of cost, turns your mind back to the reason that you're doing this, and it's because we follow a generous God, and that we are at a season where we're contemplating really important things in the church calendar in our lives, and we want our minds to be pushed back to those things by these prompts. And so to use this season wisely. So start with an inventory, work out where you're wealthy, what you're going to do, how you can give, and through this season, as you feel that pinch of lack, may that turn your thoughts to a generous God who has met all our needs and more.
Cool. Thanks, Trevor. There's a lot to continue to reflect on and take away, and perhaps spark a discussion with the community that's around you if you're watching this. So thank you so much for sharing with us. It'll be great to see people pushing into generosity this season of Lent, and appreciate all that you've done to give us some things to think about and draw back to. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.